But yes.
See all those numbers and I rely on the civil engineers to know,
Clean it up.
you know which codes you're.
Okay, we're good to go, Zach.
Awesome. Welcome everyone this evening to the Picking County Planning and Zoning regular meeting. It is Tuesday, April 9th. Present we have Jasmine, Chelsea, myself, and Jeffrey. And the agenda this evening is 143 Darling Farms LLC activity envelope. But first, we will see if there's any commissioner comments that are outside of the envelope of what we're talking about this evening.
Nothing.
Hi, Chelsea,
Nope.
Jeffrey, hey, Joe. Good. Okay, any comments from staff?
I don't think I have anything other than just the next meeting's joint meeting on the 23rd. At the BOCC for an update on the code project. And then, we do have meetings for you in May on the 7th and the 21st.
And then, is there any public who would like to comment? All right, awesome. I guess we'll get right to it. Land use action agenda item 143 Darling Farms activity envelope and site plan review, rezoning, overlay PUD review. Yeah.
So I'm actually going to just toss it over to Mitch. There's a lot in this application.
Yep.
There's a lot of pieces, and so to cut back on redundancy, Mitch is gonna do the background and what the applicant is proposing, and then I'll follow him with all the applicable codes and standards.
Perfect.
Yep.
Mitch, take it away.
Yeah, we thought that would make sense, just rather than me going, oh, okay, let me skip the first 20 minutes of what I was gonna do. So what should I do here with the Zoom? Should I unmute this until I turn this on?
Nope, just go ahead and present. The owl is picking up all your video and your speech. And just a quick question, I have a Jonathan Lowski, a Forrest Thomas, and a Robert Shire.
Oh, yeah, they're all part of our team, yep. Mostly just listening in.
Okay,
Well, probably just listening in unless something comes up. I could do that, move this out of the way, maybe. Okay, then how do I get this back to full screen? There we go. Oh, here, let's switch to normal. Okay, bear with me a second here, I'll get this working out.
thank
All
you.
right, I don't know how to get rid of this hand thing here, I tried before, and that's just doesn't want to leave. So we'll just make believe it's not there. All right, well, good evening. I'm Mitch Haas, Haas Land Planning, representing the applicants for the 143 Darling Farm LLC. They are the owners of lots 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7 of the Weeben Ranch subdivision in Old Snowmass. I'm joined here with a few members of the Eigelberger architecture team, Ian and Norman. And Mike Albert with Design Workshop, and then there's a few people joining via Zoom as well, in case we need anybody else to chime in. But hopefully I'll be able to handle it all on my own. So, let's see, it's just a little, it's just telling us what we're gonna cover here tonight, and I'll try not to take too long, but there is a lot to cover. What we're essentially doing is taking those 5 lots I'd mentioned and rearranging their lot lines to consolidate them, cluster them better, bringing them together in a place where 3 of the lots kind of converge so that we could have one residential cluster, leave the rest of the ranch unused for development purposes. So with that, we'll start with a little introduction, some background on the existing conditions and the existing approvals, and then we'll run through the proposed changes to what's already existing. So the Weeben Ranch is this little piece here, these 6 lots that we're seeing. I guess this is full size already. So as I mentioned, the properties in the back of Old Snowmass where Capitol Creek Road turns to dirt right in front of this property. It goes from pavement to dirt right at the existing ranch manager's residence. We are in the Capitol Creek watershed. Halfway, but more or less on the valley floor and then spanning up into the forests up above. The entire Weeben Ranch, all 7 lots is 467 acres. Lots 3 and 4 are separately owned and not part of this application. And like I said, we're dealing with the other 5 lots, which make up about 307 acres, give or take. The Weeben Ranch has been an active ranch property since the 1880s. Long history in the Roaring Fork Valley. This is just an example of a book where they speak with and talk about Walt Weeben, the original homesteader of the ranch. Maybe not the original, I shouldn't say. The owner of the ranch into the early 40s. And I guess all the way into about 2000. So all the most recent approvals on the property, the ones that are in place today, were done by a previous owner, back in around 2000, 2002 through 2005 or so, give or take. Joe is familiar with all this, I'll be rehashing some. So these are the existing 5 lots you see surrounded in the red that we're talking about. Lot 1 being this big piece up here as it stands. Lot 2 along the road, this being Capitol Creek Road coming through here, right? Turns to dirt right about here. Like you can see my little hand on there. Lots 3 and 4, like I said, are separately owned. Lot 3 wraps all the way around like this. Lot 4 comes up and across here. Lots 3 and 4 and 5 are encumbered in an existing conservation easement. Our proposal, as you'll see, has no bearing at all on the conservation easement. We've left it alone, stayed out of it. And not proposing anything on lot 5 either at this time. What we're essentially doing is taking lots 1, 2, 6, and 7 and reconfiguring those so that we end up with 1 common agricultural facilities parcel and 3 residential lots plus lot 5 staying the way it is as the 4th residential lot. Adjacent properties around us, all surrounding here on the north side, is all property owned by the McBride family, the Lost Marbles Ranch, these 2 sections, and John McBride's parcel here. That's all in conservation easement today. And then we've got a conservation easement that comes across most of lot 5 and 4 and 3 you'll see over here. Then this big parcel here is part of the St. Benedict's Monastery. That's not their main parcel, that's sort of the other one. That most people don't recognize or know about. This whole thing over here is all St. Benedict's Monastery. And this whole piece down in here is Capitol Creek Ranch, originally the Child's family, 5 of the lots, now Barrett Door LLC. That's all in conservation easement as well. Okay, so now this is a bit of a overview. You're looking at a drone footage aerial shot of the subject property right now. Looking at it here again, this is Capitol Creek Road. I'll talk some during my presentation about this curve right here in the road. That curve is, I don't know what the right word is, sort of important.
Curve, they call that.
Well, the child curve is this one back here. I learned that today. I finally learned the child curve is that one. This one, important to many people locally and a lot of people on the caucus as a spot where sometimes people stop and set up painting easels and paint either direction, towards the Child Ranch or up towards the Weeben Ranch or up to the mountains beyond. Certainly was important when we met with the caucus. Michael Kinsley's painted a few photos from this spot among other people. So that spot is sort of important on the scenic review discussions. And what you're seeing is this is an existing driveway into the property. These houses, there was a house, an outbuilding, septic system, et cetera, here. That was all torn down and removed about a year and change ago. The septic system had failed. That's all been cleaned up. It's no longer there, but the driveway remains. And then this is the driveway right here is the end of pavement and then dirt on the other side. The driveway into the existing ranch manager's residence And then behind it is a bunch of existing agricultural buildings back in this area. And what you see is a big flat pasture, more or less flat, down in the bottom part of the property. This is a fairly steep hillside that runs across the whole property, separates the lower pasture from this upper pasture. And that hillside is all gamble oak and brush and tree covered. And then up beyond is the forested area that's largely in the conservation easement. Okay, all right, covered everything on there, good. Okay, so now, as you know, we're in the Snowmass Capitol Creek Master Plan area. These are a couple of the highlight statements from the master plan. The main point I want to make here is that the applicants share the same values that the master plan states as the most important things in the valley. It's been quite of a good merging of minds that way that, you know, I'm very proud to present this proposal. I'm really proud of my clients in terms of being the kind of people that almost every suggestion brought to them in terms of good things that can be done, they've agreed to. So you'll see that this is an application I feel really good about. The caucus was extremely enthusiastic about. I don't want to actually state a quote, but to paraphrase, when we were done presenting our whole plan to the caucus, Michael Kinsley looked at me and said, "This is no good. We need real developers here. This is the first time in over 40 years I have nothing to complain about in a proposal. I want you to bring back something I can make you change." But so that was sort of a typical example of the response we got. So as you can see, the main goals in the caucus area are preserving open space, preserving agriculture, preserving agricultural open space, minimizing the impacts of development in terms of visuals, and just up and down impacts on the community with like traffic and things along those lines. But essentially it was preserve land, preserve natural settings, preserve vistas, and minimize the impacts of development on those things. So this map shows you the red lines are showing those existing today's lot lines. Again, lot 1 being the big parcel along the east side of the ranch. Lot 2 sitting down here with envelopes along the whole frontage of Capitol Creek Road. So you can see these are existing activity envelopes that are on these lots, as shown. The envelopes were originally done as 1041 envelopes back in 2000, 2002 times. They were reapproved just last year as activity envelopes under today's code. So these envelopes remain valid, vested, usable today. Would be subject to site plan review before anything could happen within them. But what you see is lot 1 has an envelope down here near Capitol Creek Road. Lot 2's got 11 plus acres of envelope fronting the entire Capitol Creek Road. Lot 6's envelope sits right at the top of the crest of the hill that separates the upper and lower pastures. And lot 7's got a pair of envelopes in that hillside. And then lot 5's envelope is outside the conservation easement behind the agricultural pasture and just sits there unchanged. Okay. Oh, while I'm there, what you're seeing, all that shaded area of lot 5 is the conservation easement. If you can pick it up on the map, I'm not sure if you can, but there's some shading going on in this area. And then again, throughout these pastures, those other little shading areas are the existing agricultural preservation easements that have been placed on the ranch as well. Those are important as well because you'll see we have to change those around some. So with these existing approved plans and existing envelopes, they have quite a bit of existing development rights that are intact as well. What this chart up here shows summarily is there are 31,500 square feet of residential floor area rights on these 5 lots. 20,000 were acquired through growth management allotments. Another 11,500 were subsequently approved by hearing officer reviews through use of TDRs. That would enable up to 31,500 square feet of residential floor area. How is that divided? Well, lots 1 and 2 each allow 7,500 square foot homes. The other three lots, each allow 5,500 square foot homes. In these envelopes. So what you're seeing, for example, lot 2 down here, it has two principal activity envelopes separated by an accessory envelope. The principal envelope, either one of them could accommodate the 7,500 square foot home with or without a caretaker unit. And the accessory and principal envelopes combined on lot 1 would also accommodate under today's code up to 78, almost 7,900 square feet of exempt agricultural structures. So lot 1, lot 2 alone, for example, would allow almost 16,000 square feet of development between agricultural and residential, just for lot 2. Lot 1 is more or less the same. Actually, lot 1's even bigger because it allows more agricultural structures given its acreage. And then the others are similar, but limited to 5,500 square foot homes plus ag structures. So as I mentioned, existing today, it's allowed 31,500 square feet of residential floor area and a combined total of up to 40,000, just under 40,400 square feet of agricultural structures. You don't have to memorize these numbers. We're not going to test you on them, but they are important to understand because you're going to see some pretty significant downgrading of those rights being volunteered. And it's good to have those numbers just to see relatively how significant we're talking about. Okay, so this starts to show you more about what's proposed from what is, I should say. So the new lot lines are shown on this plan. As you can see now, lot 1 becomes this sort of linear thing here. They're irregular lot lines, but it's really done to accommodate the maximum amount of clustering we were able to achieve. With the result being lots 1, 7, 6, and 7, all their residential structures in one kind of combined envelope right in this area here. The existing lot 1 envelope shrinks quite a bit, and we're saving one portion of it for a proposed site plan review now for a solar array, but nothing else happening in there. And then this being all of lot 2 here now, the upper pasture down through the hillside and all of the lower pasture along Capitol Creek Road. And that becomes our common agricultural facilities lot. So all agricultural buildings for the whole property would be limited to this lot only. No individual agricultural structures being allowed on the residential lots. Now you will notice when we get there, one of the residential lots has a small greenhouse, but that's being counted as residential square footage, not exempt agricultural square footage. And then what we've got here is that cluster, and then on lot 2, an envelope down in the corner where all the existing structures are for our agricultural complex, if you will. So essentially, all of the proposed development now is in these 2 envelopes. And then saving an envelope space over here on lot 2 and up here for any future agricultural structures that would be subject to a subsequent site plan review. Nothing proposed on lots 5 or 6 currently, as rearranged, the proposed lots 5 or 6. So all proposed development, like I said, just down here in the lower pasture. And then revising lot lines through a lot line adjustment and then using PUD to make the setbacks work with that. So here you see the 2 clustered proposed envelopes where we have site plan reviews currently proposed relative to surrounding the border of the 5 lots. So a couple of the highlights here of what the proposal involves. Like I said, right now we have 5 lots that allow 5 homes and up to 5 caretaker units on those lots. We're eliminating one of the residents and residential rights altogether so that we would have only 4 homes total, 3 currently proposed in site plan review, the 4th being reserved for a future cabin type structure on lot 5, where the maximum floor area left for it is 1,500 and change square feet. So, fairly small. My clients are not actually hunters, but when I say a hunting cabin, it's just to give you an idea of the character of what we're talking about. And we are proposing only 1 caretaker unit at this point, so effectively eliminating a full residence and up to 4 caretaker units. We're decreasing the exempt agricultural floor area allowed by as much as 63% from what's allowed today. You'll see we are proposing a total floor area limit of 15,000 square feet for agricultural structures. What's currently proposed in the site plan review is like 7,800 and change, less than 7,900 square feet. The remainder would be for any future ag structures that may end up being needed or desired within those envelopes, and like I said, subject to a future site plan review if and when. We are eliminating approximately 36.5% of the current residential floor area rights. So as I said, we have rights to 31,500 square feet. We are limiting the residential to 20,000 period, just the floor area that was allocated through GMQS. No giving up and forfeiting the ability to land TDRs here, and forfeiting that 11,500 square feet of rights. So that's a 36.5% reduction in residential floor area rights. As we'll go through this a little, I'll explain what this means, but we're shrinking the potential indirect habitat losses by clustering the development and putting all the development sites into smaller areas. That, as we'll see, there's a report from Colorado Wildlife Science, talks about zones of influence associated. The existing activity envelopes, if developed, their zone of influence is something at 23% or so larger than the zone of influence with our proposed clustering. We're taking all those development sites you saw along Capitol Creek Road in the scenic foreground and pushing them back away from the road and down in elevation, so that the center of the residential cluster, the largest house in it, is about 900 feet from Capitol Creek Road. That residential envelope ranges from about 730 to about almost 1,100 square feet, linear feet away from Capitol Creek Road. And the finished floor elevations of the homes on average are 35 feet below the elevation of Capitol Creek Road. That's pretty significant when you realize our maximum peak ridge height under growth management commitments is 30 feet. So the tops of the roofs will be lower than the elevation of Capitol Creek Road. And we are, of course, reducing the land area subject to potential disturbance by shrinking the total acreage in activity envelopes. I think that's also along the lines of 22% reduction, 23%, but I have those numbers we'll get to later. So this map, again, looking down on it, gives you a better perspective, I think. You can see all of that darker orange color is envelopes that we are eliminating and removing. Replacing much of the orange in the front foreground with a landscape restoration envelope that only allows taking these brown fields and putting them back into irrigation, and adding some native plantings in what we've been describing as natural appearing groupings of native plantings in the foreground, but done such that the clusters would still allow people to see through and beyond to understand the pastures, the meadows, and the open space feel of the property that way. And then what you see is the ag cluster staying where the existing ag buildings are and where that residential cluster sits. With that, if I could get rid of this thing on the bottom, but I can't for some reason, you'd see that we're using the existing access road. Oh, there it goes. The existing access road that comes in now and goes to where the old residential development was. We're starting with the same access road and then continuing around, keeping all these clumps of Gamble oak that are probably, 20 feet tall or so, just eyeballing when I'm out there, and wrapping around behind them so that you don't see the whole driveway when you look up it. And using those clusters to help screen the residential development area as well. So the cluster of residential sits behind those clusters, that vegetation, and 700 to over 1,000 feet away from the road, and like I said, 35, 40 feet below the elevation of the road. And again, we're using the existing entrance into the branch manager residence to provide access to the agricultural cluster. And then there's an existing road out of the back of there that connects to the internal main road of the Weaven Ranch, and that would be our continued access up to the upper pasture. These two envelopes on lot 7 go away altogether, being eliminated, as are the development rights from that parcel. And you can see the current envelope is this whole thing up here on lot 6. We've always had a concern, and we've heard from John McBride and other neighbors many times, a concern with if you develop right at the front of this envelope, sitting right at the top of this hill, it's gonna be very visible from Capitol Creek Road. So we've eliminated the front portion. What you see is just a connection so you can get a driveway back there. And so that future ag structures will be pushed back to further reduce their visibility potentially. This is the lot 5 envelope that just stays. And then this is an existing accessory envelope that goes away as well. And as you see, all the wetlands and the ponds are back in this part of the property. You see a lot of mapping, the county GIS maps. I don't know why they show a big lake and pond sitting right in here and all these streams that don't exist. At one time, Elk Creek ran through the property and went into a pond that was here and ran back out the back of the property. Many owners ago, I'm not sure when exactly, Elk Creek was piped into this irrigation ditch and runs coincidentally with that ditch, largely underground. And there's a pond back here, this little pond, that's been a concern with the caucus and the McBrides potentially, specifically living right near there. We've stayed fully away from it. We're, never mind the 100-foot setback, we're probably double, triple, whatever it is, away from the creeks and streams and wetland areas. This again is more or less the same map, but just showing the visual concerns that we took most into consideration. Again, this curve and look the views that way from it. And then these are starting over by the monastery. And when you look across the valley through this ranch up towards Mount Sopris, these sites were pretty much in the view planes from the monastery. So those were the ones we wanted to eliminate and replace with better clustering. Okay, so this is a bit more of what I just gone over, but from a different angle. So again, you see the alignment of the driveway kind of wraps around these oaks of a residential cluster back here, which, like you said, is about 40 feet or so down and some 3 football fields away from Capitol Creek Road. Just again, another view of the scenic views and how things lay on the land. It's hard to see these kind of views in person. Okay, so this is a little blow up of the actual site plan and what's in our site plan proposal. The numbers that you see are, well, I'll get to that next. Let's see. So the site plan, the goals here are we're restoring the land in the location of the former house. So that is this area where the house has been torn down and the failed septic system removed. That's part of a landscape restoration envelope, where just some light grading to clean it back up and take out the flat spots from the house. And then natural plantings, native plantings happen. We are moving development north by about 900 feet. So again, the whole frontage of Capitol Creek Road along here is activity envelope today. We're instead moving it all back away from the road to keep a scenic foreground and allow views of the open pastures. Lower in elevation again, significantly enough that you'll be looking at roof lines only really. The new driveway here, like we said, anchors against these existing oaks. And then what we've set out to do with design workshop is take the existing kind of forest that comes down into the pasture and just kind of extend the edge feeling of it a little bit around the road and then into the residential complex so that it kind of integrates the area more and makes it feel less like it's sitting in the middle of the pasture. So the native vegetation, so the foreground here, some of those aerials we'll see, this whole area here is kind of burnt out brown field now. It'll be a real nice improvement when it's irrigated and becomes more green pastures. Okay, so we're using existing driveways. Over here, you'll see in a couple slides, we've worked with the existing driveway and kept to very slight grades. The driveway is pretty flat for access purposes. And we've worked real hard to keep the grading for the driveway as tight as possible to minimize the spread of disturbance. And make sure that the pastures dominate the landscape. So again, this is all the residential cluster here, where the three lots converge. What you'll see is this is the principal residence on lot 7, and this is an accessory structure for lot 7. This, where the 2 is the principal residence, and the only structure proposed on lot. Oh, I had that backwards. That was lot 6. This is lot 7, the principal residence on lot 7. That's the one larger home. It's 8,200 square feet. All the other structures and homes are significantly smaller. I'll get to those numbers. This is the principal residence on lot 1. And then these are little accessory structures that serve lot 1. And this accessory structure has a caretaker unit within it as well. The one caretaker we proposed. Then there's a pond to be developed that will be an irrigation pond, a wildlife enhancement pond. And if the fire department wants it, a wildfire fighting pond as well. Because sometimes they don't want ponds. But it is primarily for irrigation use, and it's also being designed to CPW standards to protect wildlife should they fall through ice and be able to get out, that sort of thing. And also have wetlands and littoral shelves to provide for wildlife habitat value. And as you see, a little island, which is good for birds to have a little protection, riparian birds, from surrounding wildlife. And down here is our agricultural cluster proposed. This would be is an existing ranch manager's residence that we're proposing to demolish and replace in kind. It's a 3-bedroom residence. It'd be a 3-bedroom residence, same square footage. It's just a pretty dilapidated structure, and we believe it has asbestos in it. So we'd like to replace it with just new construction. Be better for our ranch manager. Behind there, this is the main barn to be built at number 5. This is a small ag equipment storage building and another ag equipment storage building. These 2 buildings are existing structures. They're not technically historic, they're not designated historic, but they're certainly old. And the idea there is to reuse their materials to clad new structures with the same old feel. And then this is a greenhouse structure over here. These 2 are 2 little hay storage buildings with one roof overhang connecting the 2 that you would drive under to get to the main complex. And then as you see, there's a connection to the existing road that leads back to the main access road up to the upper pasture. That's our 5 lots main access to the upper pastures and to lot 5. This other entrance into the ranch is the primary access for lot 3, which we don't own, and they have their own gate there. So we come and go this way to get up and through there. Did I miss anything? Okay, so yes, over here, this is where the solar panels would be located. It's 400 plus feet back from Capitol Creek Road. It's in a spot that is, every time I looked and checked and looked at it from every angle I can, best I can go, is pretty much invisible from Capitol Creek Road. As you come onto the property around this side, there's a landform here, a tall landform that comes down, and it's pretty heavily vegetated, so you can't see back this way. And then this is all sage and gamble oak, and there's a clearing in there. That is where we're using for our solar array. Over here, let's see, I got the drench address, the resident. Did I miss any of these other numbers? Yep, that's about it. Okay. So that view, the spot where I said people will set up their painting easels, this is kind of looking out across the Weeben Ranch from there today. You could see it's a lot of native vegetation and then the pastures behind. The idea is to maintain the native vegetation, but augment it with more native plantings and some restoration work. And then let all this become green irrigated pasture behind there. So that's the existing view. This is depicting it after we're done. And what you're seeing here way back, like this little thing, those are the roofs of the residential cluster structures way back there. And that's to the best of our ability, real accurate, given the elevation difference and the distance back there and the vegetation to be planted. But as you see, the idea here is not a row effect of trees or vegetation. We're not trying to enclose the property or block views of the pastures. To the contrary, we want to make sure to maintain that open feel with native and natural looking groupings of plantings. And then this is the existing entrance over by the ranch manager residence with the big parking lot in front. This whole parking area will be restored and revegetated and go away. Parking for the ranch manager residence when replaced will be behind it. And a new entrance gate would come in back in here. And so the rendered view of the after is, there we go. What you're seeing here, that's the hillside. That's the road that goes to the upper pasture. This is that overhead power pole that you see right here now, right? And this is the buildings. This is a roof of a building right here. And then this would be the new ranch manager residence going back here, and then just revegetated where that parking lot is now. These are the two existing, not technically historic, but historic buildings that we're going to reuse and put back into the agricultural complex. As you can see, this one, not very stable. So really just reusing its materials on an exterior. This one we're going to use as best we can, but I suspect it's going to require some new structure inside. In keeping with trying to keep the agricultural complex very traditional in appearance, this is the main barn structure, pretty low profile, very traditional barn, nothing overly, detailed or ornamental about it. Just a clear story window at the top. I believe what you're looking at there is, I can't tell if those are solar panels or what, I don't remember. Yeah, PV array on there is expected. So we're trying to use the solar array I talked about before in combination with potential rooftop solar. The idea being that if I go back, let me skip back a little. That lot 2, which is the common ag parcel, includes the solar array, includes the ag structures. The idea being that these 5 lots will form their own homeowners association and manage and own the solar together, own the agricultural buildings and facilities together. And that's why all that common stuff is on lot 2, which is a common agricultural facilities parcel. This just showing how we've moved all the envelopes from down into low wildfire hazard areas, right? So this area here for the residential and ag complex are all in the green, low wildfire. We've kept an ag in the green. We've removed the envelopes from this medium to severe hazard area hillside. Lot 5 is still staying in a moderate hazard area, but that envelope, we're just leaving it for now to leave the flexibility. When a future site plan review comes in for this less than 1,600 square foot home, I'm sure the envelope's going to shrink substantially, but we just didn't want to hem ourselves in yet. So we're just leaving it as is, but I expect it'll shrink substantially. And part of our proposal to use a PUD, part of it is up here in lot 5, given that it's 120 or so acres, there's a minimum front yard setback of 100 feet. We were proposing with the PUD to reduce that to 50 feet so as not to have to push further away from the low wildfire or closer to the severe wildfire. And so as not to have to push closer to the conservation easement lands and stay closer to the existing access road. So we're trying to set that up to reduce the footprint and impacts of the development in lot 5 eventually. The other reasons for the PUD are these lots where they converge would all have on either side of these lot lines 50 to 100 foot setback requirements and would make all of our structures have to spread out further than what we're trying to do. So we're proposing for this residential cluster, a PUD established setback requirement of per the approved plan. That way we can grade within grade by more than 30 inches close to property lines, even straight across property lines. We could have a breezeway extend across a property line rather than having to separate things by 150 to 200 feet, and spread development out more. So those were the two reasons for the PUD. We are maintaining the required 50-foot minimum setback from Capitol Creek Road, and complying with it with our two proposed site plans to begin with. This is a early study on cut and fill. While the numbers are not shown here, they are in our application, and I can't remember exactly what they say, but the result of this study is it's largely balanced, the cut and fill between the whole development. So we are not anticipating having to haul dirt up and down Capitol Creek Road in trucks. We're thinking it's all gonna stay right here on site, which is a major benefit, I think, for the whole community. It's not uncommon for a development like this to need over 500 truckloads of dirt to be hauled up and down the road. That's round trips, so
You can grab some,
both ways.
You can grab some from across the street. I think it's 3 or 4 stories at this point.
Yeah, they're gonna have a lot of extra too. I'm working on that too. We're trying to come up with plans for that, as is Mike. With this one, you know, we've been able to holistically think about this early on. So that is the goal here, is to minimize all of that and keep the cut and fill to just these little areas, really. When you think about 307 acres, that's pretty insignificant. And again, this is the grading strategies and grading plan. You can see how minimal the grading is and how tight it's being kept to developed areas. With how much of the land is not gonna be disturbed or graded at all. So this was where that existing house was, very little bit you see here, just to kind of restore. And then you can see the driveway grading is really quite tight to the driveway without spreading much, just needing to tie in with existing grades in places. That's why things spread out a little bit around the periphery. So that was the goal there, was to try to tie in without making the whole landscape look completely different. And reuse existing entrances for those purposes. There's never been, that I'm aware of, any kind of master plan for irrigating the properties on this property. We've been working with Heinz Irrigation for that purpose. Coming up with an irrigation master plan. It's still in the works and a work in progress. But the idea being, most of this purple, the ranch has always been just flood irrigated, really. So the purple would be maintaining flood irrigation, but with a combination of flood and guns. Down in this area becomes more, what do you call them? Rotors, thank you. Rotor sprinklers, with maybe some flooding, but mainly rotor. And then more individual in the ranch, in the residential compound. This area becoming part of the ag pasture. I can't read any of this on the screen, I'm sorry. But you can see now, the good news is there's a irrigation master plan, to be more efficient with the use of the water resources on the property. And that pond being an essential part of it as well. With the agriculture, as I mentioned, we have agricultural preservation easements that are on the property. As obviously this main residential complex is in what's now irrigated agricultural land. So what we've done is to make sure that we have no net loss in agricultural preservation easement land. So this acreage has been more than made up by adding back in these green areas. So this will become irrigated area. The areas around that we're eliminating from the old envelope up on lot 6 will be added back to ag preservation easement, as with that old accessory envelope corner. The net result is a somewhat of a gain in land area within the agricultural preservation easements. And then these are our planting strategies. As I've mentioned, you know, we're trying not to get carried away or make it look foreign, but really work with the landscape and the character of the area. around the residential complex. Like I mentioned, the idea is to carry existing vegetation patterns lightly into and through the complex. When you get internal to the complex here, maybe some more formal plantings like in this area and through the auto circle. But otherwise, very natural appearing. What you're seeing is from the ag complex, there's a ditch improvement that will run across here, run into, it's a new little ditch that runs around and through and connects to the pond. And then an outlet from the pond back to the other main ditch that runs along the east side of the property. And that's the general planting, if I, oh, did that come up? So you can see again along Capitol Creek Road, sparsely but native looking and natural appearing groupings of plantings. These are some character kind of studies that Design Workshop put together. So around the ponds in our streams and ditches, something along these lines with, you know, natural looking water courses, some wetland plantings with them. Internal to the residential compound with a little more formal areas and how they spill out into the pastures, nice transition areas with some plantings to help with that. The driveway, again, the idea is to keep it so you don't see a straight shot, but you see curves and protection with vegetation around it so that it fits into the landscape. And then, you know, nothing crazy in entry gates, just gates to be able to keep cattle and livestock in or out, as the case may be sometimes, and define the entrances to the property. We are very much cognizant of the night sky goals of the caucus. We are committed to, with the greenhouse on the property, there's already a code and a condition of approval that greenhouses emanate no light between essentially an hour after dusk to an hour before dawn. And so just want to point out that we know about these things. There'd be no driveway lighting, and that we're complying with the county lighting code as it may be amended by the time building permits will be applied for. I mentioned that we have a solar array. We're also planning geothermal wells. Those are to be accommodated already within the residential activity envelopes. We've left area for those in that cluster. And this down here on the map is showing you along Capitol Creek Road, that envelope is all landscape restoration envelope. No actual development in there. All right, and that's kind of the highlights again. So again, the goals for us, very much consistent with the master plan and the county code, was to maximize our clustering. And doing that by minimizing landscape disturbance as an offshoot of accomplishing that. Clustering the development into ranch compound fields, traditional ranch compound fields, preserving scenic views and the rural character, also as a byproduct. Conserving wildlife habitat is another byproduct. I have those numbers, so we are shrinking habitat loss, potential habitat losses by about 22%. That's the reduction in the zones of influence from the existing envelopes to our proposal. Protecting streams and wetlands, just essentially through avoidance, and creating some wetlands. We do plan to and have started to look into potential plans eventually for restoring Little Elk Creek, like finding out the original channel and restoring it and creating it again. We just couldn't wrap that into this proposal because it's literally years of work to unfold. One, trying to figure out where it is. Two, then, you know, dealing with things like wetlands and Army Corps permitting and state engineer. It's just it's a whole mess to deal with, but we still have that on the back burner as something we want to come back to. Restoring disturbed landscape, like I talked about, that whole Capitol Creek frontage, the brownfields, bringing it back into pasture use. Mitigating wildfire risk, again, moving to all low wildfire areas and complying with all wildfire requirements. Reducing density, intensity, and spread of development. So, you know, we have approvals for 5 residences. We're reducing it to 4. That's a significant reduction. We're reducing 31,500 square feet of floor area rights to 20,000. And the spread of development, of course, just consolidating the envelopes into a pair of clusters. The remaining agricultural square footage, like I said, we proposed that this plan has less than 8,000 square feet. We proposed a limit of 15,000 square feet. Like I said, today's rights are well over 40,000 square feet spread across the whole property. All 5 lots in their envelopes. We're dropping that to 15 within just the envelopes proposed that would remain on the common agricultural facilities parcel. And by creating a common agricultural facilities parcel, particularly one of the size we're proposing, the code would say a common agricultural facilities parcel is allowed unlimited exempt agricultural floor area. We know that's not gonna be very palatable to the caucus or the county. Nobody wants unlimited. So we tried to come up with what we thought was a very reasonable number of 15,000. So we have almost 8,000 proposed. We're leaving another, let's call it 7,000 for future use. Will maybe happens, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But if it does, it would be site plan review and in these envelopes. We have commitments to beneficial and efficient use of water. We are carrying forward requirements from the old GMQS covenants, one of which we should probably talk about a little bit because a condition was transcribed in part, not in whole, in the last round of approvals. And then as it carries forward to here, it's still just a part. But maybe I'll get to that in a second. But otherwise, carrying forward all those water commitments and now doing better with an irrigation master plan. And maintaining the same or more land area within the agricultural preservation easements. And then we are committing to renewable energy with the solar panels. We've designed all residential structures to comply with the 35% minimum solar ready requirement. We just think we're more likely to do the solar array just because it's easier to maintain, it will be more efficient. You don't have things like losses of space for eaves and vent pipes and wrong angles and things like that. And you know, you don't have to climb onto a roof to wipe snow off. You can just walk over there and brush these things off. So that's the idea between a ground mount array, and we found a location that is, to the best of our abilities to knowledge, invisible from anywhere except on the property. And again, we're using geothermal. We are going to study the potential for maybe some micro hydro use with our ditches. But again, that was another thing that was too much to try to figure out right now. So no commitments there, but it is also on the back burner of things we want to continue looking into. Another item of things we want to continue looking into came up from the caucus meeting. The caucus, when we were done presenting, and asked us if we would consider additional employee housing on site. I think the one ranch manager residence would be insufficient. My clients are very much open to that. In fact, they would like to do it. We just don't want to stop this whole process to design and plan all that right now. But to the extent the commission feels that that's something you'd want to recommend the county commissioners consider or give direction on, we're all for it. What we would have in mind right now in preliminarily, nothing's been designed or figured out yet. But what we have in mind at this point, I'll go back to some of these aerials because it'll be easier to show. There's a good one. Yeah. So the plan now is to tear down the existing ranch manager residence and replace it in kind. That will leave us with a lag period where we don't have anywhere for an employee to live. So what we're currently thinking, and we want to continue with this approval, get this approval, and if everybody's on board with it, we come back with some kind of amendment. What we're thinking is possibly at the barn structure or one of the other ag structures, adding a unit that would be similar to like a caretaker unit, but deed restricted as another ranch manager unit, about 1,000 square feet maybe, and added to. And then instead of replacing this ranch manager residence where it is, we've talked to several ranch managers, and they all tell us and tell Forrest, who's our ranch manager now, You do not want to live in your agricultural buildings. You will never get a moment's peace from work. It'll drive you crazy and you'll end up hating everything about it. They all say you need to be a little bit isolated somewhere else on the ranch. So what we've started to think with that logic is somewhere maybe in the back of this meadow here, tucked in below these trees where we know McBride can't see it. McBride already has a single-story house right here that they don't use, and you can't even see it from anywhere except for maybe like right here, you can see it. So the thought is possibly putting something up here and then doing the small unit down here. And the thought being we would build the small unit with the barns, then tear down the existing ranch manager unit, so a ranch manager has somewhere to live in the new one. And then build the other one and have both so that they could serve. And the small one that would stay with the barns would probably end up being more of a seasonal use. For when summertime is, so that we'd have the one ranch manager year round and the other one seasonal. I know it's a lot to think about. It's not part of the proposal. But it's in the back of our minds and we're trying to just be as open book as we can about all the thinking out here because, well, why not? And we think it's all good thinking and things that, you know, we hope people will support. What's also showing on this map, if I could get in here, I can't seem to get there with this, I've got the Zoom thing blocking me, but all these little yellowed lines are the existing envelopes that don't get used. So you can see how much bigger they are in all these areas of envelope compared to what we're doing. And then this one here has that whole envelope behind it that gets eliminated. And then you can see all these envelopes up here and here just get eliminated altogether.
Mitch, while you're on the slide,
I can get there. Let's see. Yep.
so I had the question and Jeffrey also raised the question. Can you clarify the solar envelope versus the actual solar array and the size of the array and the location of that? I don't think the labeling.
Yeah, so the solar array, we've kept it to what the code allows right now, which is, I believe, 1/10 of an acre. So we're at 4,300 square feet and change. That's this, you can see it's kind of yellowish here, that square. So it's the top of this little, we kept an envelope here total of about 0.65 acre. I think the existing envelope's like 2.65 acre. We kept it at 0.65 more, my numbers might be off by a decimal place or something, but more or less there. So the rest of this envelope below might house either, well, it could be a potential location for another ranch manager house if the other one I suggested doesn't work out, or just another agricultural building for future site plan review. But the back end is the little square area, that's 1/10 of an acre for solar array. And then an underground utility envelope, just so you can run lines from there to the access drive to get to all the buildings. Does that cover what you had in mind? Okay. I think that covers, well, I don't know if you want me to go through conditions or not. Most of our conditions are fine. Tammy and I have worked through them. The one I was mentioning is, I believe it's condition 12. Let me see.
Yeah.
Condition 12. So one of the old GMQS covenant provisions stated that use of well water for lawn and garden irrigation would be prohibited with the exception of allowances provided in typical state exempt well permits. That's the full language in the GMQS covenant. When the approvals were redone in 2023 and the idea was to carry that condition forward and make it still a condition on the property, the language of with the exception of allowances provided in typical state exempt well permits was left out. I believe inadvertently, I know I never discussed it with Ezra when he was doing the review and writing the conditions. And then I think what Tammy done was just carried forward from that determination from 2023, and we didn't notice it until yesterday. That when our water attorney looked through it and said, wait, what happened to this provision that's kind of critical? So we want to just add that language back in. Otherwise, you know, I think we're good on all the other conditions. Yeah.
All right.
Covered it. So I think that's, all I planned on presenting. I don't know if you want to add anything, all good. I'm happy to answer questions unless you want to wait until after Tammy is finished. Whatever you'd like.
Anybody have questions for Mitch now?
He's got the pretty graphics, so if you guys want to refer back to graphics, that might be a good time.
I don't know why our presentation, I don't have like the blow ups of the site plans and all, but they're in the application, which I hope you, oh God, which I know is very, very long, but a lot of it's exhibits. Sorry. And a lot of all the old approval history is, pages of that.
Does anyone want to ask Mitch any questions right now, or should we go to Tammy?
All right, I'll just share my screen.
So any stuff?
It's like no to Monty Cheetos. It used to be really good food in P&Z.
Is that a hint?
Share.
You need a budget.
Tax budget. Got it.
Okay, so I get the boring part of the presentation, about graphics and all the code standards. So you can basically break what the applicant is requesting into these 5 items on the screen. So that's a subdivision exemption for the lot line adjustment, a major amendment to the development permit, the activity envelope and site plan review, the special review for the CDU, and the rezoning to a PUD overlay. This application was referred to the agencies shown on the screen, and we got comments back from a lot of them in support. The one exception, we did get comments back from the Roaring Fork Fire, and they did not approve this application, but we'll discuss that a little bit later. So I'm just gonna jump right in, and I'm also gonna kind of assume that everyone has read the memo, which goes over in detail all the code sections. There's a lot of code sections, so I'm not gonna go read everyone and respond to everyone, but if you guys do have questions, feel free to jump in and interrupt me here. So the first part we're gonna go through is the subdivision exemption for the lot line adjustment. On the left, you can see, as Mitch pointed out, the existing lots and existing envelopes, and on the right is the proposed. So the criteria that needs to be met for this lot line adjustment is shown on the screen, A through F. And these are pretty straightforward criteria to adjust those lines. As Mitch mentioned, lot 5 is going to stay the same. So staff believes that this criteria has been met and that the number of lots stays the same. They're all gonna stay conforming in size. They'll be 35 acres or more. The allowed floor area will be unaffected. So recently we did go through some code changes, which did limit floor area in this planning area to 5,750. However, because the floor area was allotted through GMUS allotments, that floor area does not lapse per section 64040. So the applicant is entitled to that floor area that they went over in the presentation. So the floor area will remain unaffected, is what I'm trying to say, and in general, staff, like I said, finds that the lot line adjustment criteria has been met. So moving right on to the major amendment to a development permit. There's three parts to this request. So the applicant is requesting to first reallocate the GMQS allotments between the 5 lots. They're also requesting to amend the agricultural easement area as well as amend the deed restriction for the ranch manager's house. And because these requests aren't consistent with the previous approvals, whether they be the hearing officer determination or BOCC approvals, they are considered a major amendment. And they need to comply with the following criteria here, shown on the screen. So the first item, like I said, is the request to reallocate the GMQS allotments. As Mitch had shown you, here's a chart of what they are requesting in comparison to what is approved right now, which does result in a net reduction across the 5 lots. So back to the criteria for that major amendment. Basically, the staff finds that it complies with all this criteria. It doesn't change the use or the basic character. It's not a new land use activity and so on. So we found that that complied with the request. The next item that they're requesting is to amend the agricultural easement area. So here's that graphic showing, it's a bit hard to see. The darker hatched areas is the existing agricultural easement areas. Well, and the very darkest, use my cursor here. This area here is a new area being added into that agricultural easement area, as well as that area on lot 5. For that future activity envelope. And so there will be a net gain, I believe, of 1.57 acres or something like that in agricultural lands. So again, back to that criteria for a major amendment. Staff believes that this, rearranging these ag areas complies with all this criteria. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't violate a land use code standard. It doesn't increase the need for on-site parking and so forth. Right, so I'm just gonna keep plugging on to the next request for the amendment to the deed restriction agreement for the ranch manager house. So in 2002, the hearing officer determination granted a GMQS exemption for density bonus for the conversion of the existing residence on that lot to a deed restricted category 3 sale house unit. And within that determination, it was required that the unit be a sale unit and comply with state limitations on rent control. And so with this application, the applicant is requesting to now allow that unit to be rented versus owned. They have been in communication with APSHA, who has stated they're open to this amendment, as long as it's an RO unit and has a specified category to control the rent rate. I'll also note that currently the Redstone Castle application, which the P&Z heard, I'm not sure when, but recently, heard that is now being considered by the BOCC. And with that is the code amendment to, let me see here exactly. So they will basically make it so that you can have employee housing units on site for these ranches. So that's going to the BOCC tomorrow for second reading. So if that is approved, that will also be available to the applicant for that potentially second unit that Mitch was discussing. And like Mitch said, that the P&Z or the BOCC, you're more than welcome to discuss that idea of a second unit. Staff didn't review the application for that unit because it wasn't included in the application, so, I'll leave that to the board to discuss. But all in all, staff believes that the request to change that deed restriction does comply with all the criteria listed here on the screen. So moving on to the request for the activity envelope and site plan review. Again, there's basically two primary areas, the ag area and the residential area, and then of course, the future activity envelope on lot 5. So the request for activity envelope and site plan approval must comply with the policies in chapter 7. Some of those are listed on the screen here. Site preparation and grading, so all that will occur. We saw the cut and fill balance exercise and all the grading plans that will comply and be within the proposed activity envelopes. The activity envelopes are primarily all on slopes less than 15%. It's a very flat area. So they don't have any issue with steep or potentially unstable slopes. They've demonstrated compliance with water courses and drainage. As Mitch said, there's some question about the location of Little Elk Creek, but right now they're staying well beyond that 100-foot setback of any stream and the associated wetlands with the Little Elk Creek. There's no geologic hazards on site. There was a wildfire hazard assessment done by a wildfire professional. That report wasn't in the application, which basically found that the 2 primary activity envelopes are within a low hazard area. Lot 5 is within a moderate hazard area. And at the time that they come in for site plan review, they'll have to do probably another fire report and obviously demonstrate compliance with that moderate hazard at that time. The Roaring Fork Fire Protection Agency did review this application. I don't believe they had the time to really dig in, and they did submit comments that were in the packet that didn't approve this application as it is. Brooks Top was looking for more details on water storage and access to the storage. But the biggest issue both she and I had with this application is right now there's not direct access to the primary residence on lot 6. So it's the first residence right as you come in to here. As you can see, there's no direct access, although the driveway does come close to it. Staff is hoping that they could do some kind of just, amend the site plan to have a driveway pull right up to that house. I know Mitch has been in conversation with Brooke right now to start working out those concerns that she had. I think there's also a concern that the CDU within the accessory structure, right here, probably doesn't have a direct vehicular access either. So that's definitely a big issue that needs to be worked out. And right now, staff has drafted in the resolution that Roaring Fork Fire provides a letter of approval prior to this application being considered by the BOCC, but open to the P&Z amending that condition if they see fit too as well. Mitch covered the ground mounted solar array. So the code does typically require that solar be placed on the roofs, unless there is some demonstration that just that ground mounted is a better solution. I think in this case, because there are so many units and they are clustered together, it does make sense that they do a solar array. And for our site, that I was honestly skeptical that you couldn't see it from the road, but it is very, very hidden. And so there's no scenic concerns with that array at this time. There was a wildlife report done also by an ecologist, and he found that there wouldn't be any significant or direct or indirect impacts to the wildlife listed in chapter 7 of the code. The report also found that there is no wildlife habitat-based rationale to maintain the GMPQS covenant, which required a limitation on construction timing between December 15th and April 1st. So he recommended that condition be removed. He also found that the condition that there be an oak regeneration plan is no longer applicable, just because the activity envelope is now in the grass and pasture area. And it won't result in any direct or indirect loss of wildlife habitat or the removal of that oak habitat. So at this point, staff didn't carry forward those prior conditions of approval from those old resolutions. The next item in chapter 7 is the scenic view protection areas. Mitch went over pretty well with some of those graphics, what potentially will be visible from Capitol Creek Road. And the reasons why it will be concealed, due to the distance, the lower finished floor elevations. There is that unique condition that structures be limited to 25 feet to the midpoint of roofs. So staff has carried forward that condition from prior approvals into the drafted resolution. They've also got that revegetation envelope along Capitol Creek Road, which will greatly screen a lot of the proposed development. So, yeah, just included some of those graphics that Mitch had there. So moving on to the next section of the request is the special review for a CDU. They are requesting a 825 square foot CDU on lot 6, and that will be in the subgrade in that accessory structure. And in general, just to breeze through these code standards, staff found that the CDU complies with these standards. The applicable master plan for this area is the 2003 Valleys of Capitol Creek and Lower Snowmass Creek Master Plan. It doesn't directly speak to, is that what I said, 2023?
Yeah, the new master plan.
It doesn't directly speak to CDUs, but it does speak about structures being subordinate to the land, and being consistent with the surrounding rural character. CDUs are an acceptable use within the caucus boundary, and they're not uncommon in the caucus. You can read through those standards, but all in all, like I said, staff believes the CDU complies with all those standards. And then moving on to the PDU criteria of the code. The first one is section 24010. And that just has these two conditions or standards here. And like Mitch was explaining, the applicant is proposing to do this PUD overlay just so that they can amend the required setbacks. And basically, what he's proposing is to, instead of just giving a set number for a setback, 50 feet, 100 feet, it's going to be per the PUD plan and site plan. And so to be approved as a PDU needs to comply with first section 24010 here, and that's A and C, whether there have been change conditions affecting the subject parcel or the surrounding neighborhood that's proposed to support the proposed amendment, and B, the effect of proposed rezoning development on traffic and road generation and safety. So basically the only things that have really changed is that these lots are now under one ownership and they can do this PUD proposal. Other things that have changed are changes in the land use code, that support clustering, as well as a lot of changes in building codes, which the building codes have become much, are more geared to more efficient buildings. So I think with this PUD proposal, which is, meeting these criteria, there shouldn't be any more traffic generation. Obviously, there's less units being proposed than what could be approved. All right, the next section is section 23040, two-step criteria for PUD approval. So they need to comply with criteria A, B, and C. Through the memo, staff addressed all the applicable provisions of the land use code. B is the land policies, which basically support all of the code sections that staff addressed in the memo. And then C is that all prior development approvals applicable to the subject property need to be complied with. So staff has gone through all the old approvals, the GMQS covenants, and a lot of those old conditions have now been replaced with more current, like I said, building codes, land use codes. The few that we did amend, I mentioned for the wildlife report, we've removed, what else? Staff is open to Mitch's amendment to condition 12 that he mentioned, where the language wasn't carried completely forward with about the wells, and so we're amenable to revising condition 12. What else? There we go. I think that's it. So I'll move on to the next criteria of PUD review criteria and designation. So there's a lot more code sections here. And basically these are all to protect the rural area. And commission needs to find that all these conditions have been met. So in general, like I said, the 2023 master plan for the valleys of Capitol Creek and Lower Snow Master Creek is the applicable master plan. And staff believes that the PUD is consistent with this plan, and that the key goals include preservation of natural lands, preservation of agricultural lands, keeping residential structures subordinate to the land and complementary to the rural character. It also supports minimizing visual impacts using energy efficient building techniques and solar systems, and building smaller sized homes of 5750 square feet or less. So with the exception of that 8,255 square foot residence on lot 7, all the other residences comply with that 5750 cap. And as I mentioned earlier, pursuant to section 64040.
Except for the 1635. That's what she said. Okay, no, but she said the 8225. There's two that above 50.
Well, the 6,300 is several buildings add up to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it. So
Sorry,
it's,
I'm just looking
that-
at the resolution.
yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right there.
They are separate buildings, but they do add up to the 6,000.
I was channeling my inner John McBride.
So as I was saying, pursuant to 64040, that floor area does not lapse, and they're entitled to that floor area for that home. And I could go through all these code criteria, but maybe I'll just see if you guys have questions. That I believe is the last, no, there's more. There's more. So here's some more. Again, staff found that the application complies, all of these sections were addressed in the memo. So I'm just gonna say, if you guys have more questions on any of these, let me know, but all in all, staff found that this application complied with all the applicable standards and recommends that the PNC recommend approval to the DOCC for the drafted resolution. As Mitch mentioned, he did have some very minor edits that I have since made, that were just, spelling, grammar. And Jeffrey Woodruff also had some edits that I went over with him that were staff considers to be very minor, as well. What else? I think I'll leave it at that and turn it back over to the board for questions.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Questions?
Public hearing,
Public hearing.
this is public hearing.
Yeah.
Should open.
Oh,
There was no public notice.
yeah, no,
I mean, if there's public that wants to comment. on it.
No.
yeah. So,
We're open to the public, but it's not a
Yeah.
public hearing. Noted. Questions for Mitch? Anyone will start?
Sure, I just have a couple. I think it's an excellent application. There's not much really here to comment on, but I just had a couple of questions, I guess. You said that there's only gonna be one CDU and you're allowed 4 CDUs. Does that mean that you're gonna prohibit coming back for any more CDUs, or is that still an open door?
Well, we're using all the floor area, so there's no floor area left for any additional CDUs. So if we wanted to come back for another one, we'd have to take it out of something.
Got it, okay. And then on the square footage, that you're allowed, some of that was with TDRs. So you're reducing that, so is this,
We're
Maxing
forfeiting it,
this
yeah.
is gonna be it, and there's no more square footage that's gonna be allowed?
That's right, we're forfeiting the TDR approvals, which never lapse under the code,
Sure.
but we're forfeiting them, so that 11,500 square foot of rights just goes away.
So does that mean, the project will never come back and compete in growth management or try to get future TDRs to have more development on
That's the plan.
it? Okay.
Yeah, this is a real odd situation because these are not, my clients are not developers, they're end users, which I think is the plan that makes that really evident. No developer would put all their homes in one little spot when they have envelopes spread all over the place with open spaces around them. No developer would forfeit 11,500 square feet of rights and an entire residence. So yeah, this is all planned for one user, one complex, one owner essentially to keep them all and manage it all together. So this is their plan. When in the year and a half, 2 years we spent planning this application before it came to the county. Every time I'd go to the client and say, are you willing to simply forfeit the 11,500? Yes, I am. Are you willing to limit it to just 20,000? They had to really work on those architectural plans to get it to the 20,000 and not come in and say, how about 23,000? But yeah, that's what we've been working with and keeping it all to.
Great. That's all I had. for questions.
To that question, the conditions only, it just basically says floor area will be limited to whatever, what they proposed. There isn't a further condition saying they shall not compete in growth management.
That was really kind of what I was getting at.
Mhm.
This is something to come back later and say, we'd like to, whatever,
They
make the
could
unit
come
a
back for-
lot fine, bigger than, 1,550 square feet or whatever it is.
It'd be real hard to do. We're kind of committed to so many things. I don't know where we'd come up with points if we went back from growth management.
Um, Okay, that answered my question. Guess then we'll get to the resolution. Jeffrey, I'll have a solution.
No, I would, if I could just add to that, so based on this conversation, and I did meet Forrest and have been to a couple of caucus meetings as well. So that if we could add as a condition of approval that the applicant could explore or something that's just, it's a condition of approval, which is just explore as a condition of approval, an amendment or expanding the CDUs, if you will, to multiple ranch managers. I mean, again, this is not, don't think this is the language, but it's not stopping you from going to BOC. You don't need to go back and redraw anything. but that the P and Z would advise or look to explore additional employee units on site.
Yeah, I mean, even if you just want to support the caucus's recommendation of having more on-site housing, you know, assuming we'll have to comply with codes and make it work.
And the caucus's logic was that it's 5 miles up Capitol, it would reduce the vehicle miles traveled. And it's the same logic we just went through at Redstone, which is housing your employees on site. Would benefit the caucus and the client.
Yeah, and the client would, the applicant would love to do it. They just, you know, didn't.
It's
It
an
just,
explore.
it was one of those things that we didn't think we should propose more, you know, at the time.
It's an explore, it doesn't slow you down in terms of the application.
Right.
But the P and Z would echo the comments of the caucus in exploring additional on-site, deed restricted, RO rented housing in the valley. Again, because if you talk to McCabe or anyone else, they have no housing. They need more housing for ranch managers, et cetera. So trying not to make that same mistake.
Yeah, and even Forrest will tell you he could use some help during in the summer months. Forrest is the ranch manager, if you didn't know the name we're talking about.
Chelsea, do you have any questions for Mitch?
Thanks, Zach. There's so much information that it's hard to cipher out questions. And I guess I'm glad that Joe asked his question about whether you can come back for another bite at the apple, because it seems like a whole heck of a lot to ever unwind in another land use application. So I'm glad to hear the answer is most likely no, never, because these are end users that will actually construct these approvals. I guess my biggest question has to do with the resolution, but not like persnickety question. It's just how will all of this be enforceable? Like, for example, anytime construction occurs on the site out in the middle of seemingly nowhere, will there be fences put up to, will the little tiny requirements line by line of this, I think might be the longest resolution in my entire history on P and Z. How will these be followed and assured to be complied with?
I think it's a process that our building department takes when they take in a permit. The resolution starts with, first they need to record all these, specific documents, including these deed restrictions and so forth. And then it's the building department really, right, that with the first building permit, they'll do a construction management inspection, and then I don't know how they do it either, but they do make it happen.
When you're applying for a building,
I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wonder if there's a way to do this rather than lumping so much into one that you split it out. But I guess that's what led us to this. This is an assemblage proposal. So I don't know what the answer is, but it just feels like almost too much all in one.
when you apply for a building permit, you have to provide a copy of the recorded resolution, and then each condition provide a response telling how you complied or what plan page sheet to look to see that it's been addressed or met. So each condition gets specifically addressed in the building permit applications.
Yeah, and it might be overkill because there are so many buildings that they'll have to submit this resolution and respond every time they do a structure. So yeah, it is a lot.
Yeah, we've found that across the street. It's not easy to do, but it's something you do.
Okay, well, it just seems like it could be really burdensome for staff to have to go through this every time as well. So rather than, yes, it's just efficient to waste resources on little things might be overkill. I don't know. Just that's my comment in observing this lengthy application. But I do think it's a very well put together application, certainly deserving of approval, and I support it. I just hope that it's procedurally assembled in the right manner so that going forward it doesn't expend unnecessary county resources to do one or two things here and there on a large land area.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah.
Join you.
Well, that kind of raises another question in my mind, and, I'm just curious, are they gonna build this all at once?
Originally, the thought was yes. Now some phasing of, one or two residences might happen before some of the accessory building and things like that, but we haven't really nailed it down yet. So for instance, on, what are my lot numbers, lot 6, the accessory structure might come in before the principal residence. And if that's the case, then the caretaker unit just won't get deed restricted until the residence comes in and then make it a caretaker unit. Things like that, but we haven't, put together like a phasing plan at this point. But the majority of it is anticipated to happen all at one time.
There's nothing in the resolution, I assume, that says anything to that. They could come in
Sure.
1 year, of course, it takes about, a year to get your building permit submitted, and then another year to get it processed, and then build for a couple of years, and you come in for the next house, and, you get another 2-3 years, and then the next house, and, you got construction going on up there for a decade or two.
Yeah, I mean, the thought
Yes,
here
I
is really
felt
most
that.
of it at once.
Where it's pretty much the applicant gets to decide when they want, I mean, I don't, I don't really think that it's probably appropriate.
I would
To
say
put a
we've
condition.
never really driven that. I mean, if
Yeah.
people have come in and said, I mean, again, looking at this, you figure they're creating a cluster of development. I would, who knows, but
You'd
it's
think
not anything
economics
we've
would
really
drive the decision more than anything.
tried to say, you need to get this done within a certain period of time.
Right, and they don't wanna live in a construction zone more than they need to either. We did think about with this proposal, given what I think are a lot of merits, requesting an extended vested rights period, but we said, let's just do it, and if we need to, when we get to the end of 3 years and come back, then we'll do it, rather than ask for something that leaves too much uncertainty as to what are you protecting against.
It's taking 3 years to go through the process. and pull permit.
What is the
Overall.
vesting period then? I don't remember seeing it. What is the extended vesting period?
It's 3 years standard vested rights.
Oh. Hmm.
We did not request a longer period.
That was it.
Jasmine, do you have any questions for Mitch?
No questions. I would like to echo Jeffrey's comment about encouraging the applicant to provide additional caretaker units, not necessarily putting that in the form of a condition, but maybe you can suggest a way to get that done. I feel strongly that would be an important addition to this application.
I think you're talking about not caretaker dwelling units, you're talking about deed restricted on site housing, because caretaker dwelling units are be rented.
The same that you said in Forest.
Yeah.
There's 3 of them that everyone in the caucus will be having.
Yeah, essentially the resident occupied ranch manager, whatever, we'll figure that out.
Which again doesn't exist for 10 miles, so
Right,
it would be a nice addition.
Well,
Yeah.
That's always been a problem with the for sale unit, because you sell it to the ranch manager and then the ranch manager quits their job.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, great, I got the unit, but I don't have to, work the ranch anymore. So I think that's
yeah,
really
yeah,
important, and unfortunately, it goes back to, years back when we didn't want to have rental units out in the rural part of the county.
exactly, and
So
that's,
that, the whole sale rental issue,
Right, yeah, exactly, that's probably right. too.
that's why we wanna change the deed restriction language is, it sat unoccupied for almost 20 years. When my client bought the property, they didn't want to have any kind of violations, so they found somebody that qualified and put someone in it. But nobody's liked this condition of it has to be owned by the ranch manager, because what if you have a real problem employee that you need to fire for good cause? Now what? You can't fire the person unless you go to court to get them out of the unit. It's just an unworkable situation, so we're just looking to make it a normal ranch manager where the HOA, the 5-lot HOA will own the unit and rent it under the terms of the deed restriction.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm really quick. How your offsite solar array, how big is that? Like kilowatt hours or kilowatt? Isn't that the measurement? metric for that?
Yeah.
Or are you doing it in square feet or what's the?
Yeah, we kept it to whatever that codified limit was. I want to, I might be making up a number, but I seem to think it was like 25 kilowatt hours. Is that what the code says? Otherwise, it becomes a commercial array,
Well,
so we've kept
solar
it to
farm,
the,
yeah.
yeah, we kept it to under solar farm.
Yeah.
limit. Exactly.
It's nice because, you know, this board worked for, seemed like it was much longer, but it was a couple years rewriting this language for where we added this ability, because before that, right? Correct. It's been like since 2017, right? When we sent this language to the BOCC to be codified, but as I recall, 2017, before that, you could not do an offsite solar array in Pickens County. It had to be on the roof, right? And then that was the language that we added and amended so that you had the ability to do that.
There was always an ability to, yeah,
Right.
yeah, but it was, I mean, again, the language still lived there. I think what we did in 2017 was try and improve the process to make it easier for
Clean it up.
certain size arrays
Yeah,
versus everyone having to go through a full, basically, activity envelope site plan review.
right.
We wanted to, create a little more administrative opportunity
Yeah,
for certain size array. But in the end, we still always went with, we prefer to see them on the roof.
right.
If you have a good reason why that doesn't work, then,
Which, yeah, because there's lots of logical reasons to not have them. So it's nice to see that happen, when you
Yeah,
clean the code up
absolutely.
and then you see it in real life, and there's really good reason for that array to be ground mounted, like you said, all the different reasons, like snow load and access and, and if you can hide it and it,
Yeah, it comes a little easier to store it rather than individual things into buildings and storage in separate storage areas. It's, when you're serving more than one residence, this seemed like the better way to do it.
I think it's a good application. You can tell sort of the intent and the mindset of the client through that, through the application, so,
Yeah, well, that comes through.
yeah. Jeffrey?
So, 3 areas of discussion, and again, so you guys, awesome application, and thank you for the details, architectural and site. So site questions, I'm gonna look at Mike, but, so one of the caucus master plan is not to dominate the landscape, and I think we always think of that as buildings. But why would you have 20-foot driveways in a rural environment?
In the county standards, if one driveway is serving more than 3 residences, the driveway standard is 21 feet wide. But an upside to that is if your driveway is 20 feet wide or more, you don't need pullouts every 400 feet. So once we get past a residence and it's not
Yeah.
serving 3, it narrows.
Okay, because there's quite a few new driveways that source on the landscape. So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm agreeing with you. You probably would say yes, let's great.
The good thing is this one's pretty flat, so it's not like big cuts that go with it and,
And then you're part of Roaring Fork Rural, and I saw Brooks' note again, sort of the rejection letter, I think is page 566. And specifically, their adopted code says any building 5,000 square feet or more, or in a location that is difficult to access as determined by the fire official code, which I think is where she's going with lot 6, shall be equipped with an approved automatic sprinkler system. So do you have a fire protection person on this, or it's just?
so far just civil, but they've since changed it. Anything 3,000 square feet or more has to be sprinkled.
That's Rick.
Aspen has.
That's Aspen.
Oh, they haven't done that down there
That's
too?
his res, yeah,
Oh, I
that's
thought
his
they did.
reso. He's either 0 or 3,000, and Roaring Fork, the way it reads, is 0 or 5,000 to me. Right,
Okay.
because they're basically saying, we can make you sprinkler any building.
Yeah, I mean, we were anticipating having to sprinkler just because of where we are.
I was,
Response times being what they are.
we've had 2 structural fires, I think, in the last 2 years with loss of life.
Right.
So, and you only have 1 fire person in the station at
Right.
Meskin Capital,
Yeah.
so I would consider if you have a full-time employee that you would sprinkler that
I mean, I just anticipated a condition.
It's not in the condition of approval, which
Okay.
is why I sort of flagged it and said, it seems inconsistent
Yeah.
with the way the code's adopted in Wallington.
I would assume we're sprinkling all the residential
We get
structures.
proposals out
You know.
already by discretion.
Yeah, and then again, sort of question mark is why would you have not an FTC, why do you have hydrants 250 feet from structures?
I don't know what happened there. We've started
I
to,
don't have 250 feet of hose.
yeah, of course not.
The intersection.
we know it's 150 foot hose length, distance requirement, all of
Yeah.
that.
It seemed odd.
We started working with Roaring Fork Engineering. I mean, they've been involved from the beginning, but Anthony and I have started to talk with Brooke and.
Yeah.
You know, we're confident we're gonna get all this worked out without the site plan changing in any
Yeah.
significant way. Like the house on lot 6, it's near the road. We just gotta put in somewhere for the fire truck to get closer to the unit. The hydrants, same thing. We were asking them, we're saying to Brooke, where do you want water storage? And that's where we'll put the hydrants, rather than guessing at it and having them tell us, no, we want it somewhere else.
And given your end of line, switching subject slightly, are you gonna do batteries as well?
Oh, yeah.
Solar with batteries? Or
Oh boy.
Did you get there is an exemption too for 36 square feet exempt for battery storage.
I don't know about that yet. I don't think we've gotten quite to that level of detail yet in the
So
solar.
again, you've got free square footage, put it somewhere.
Right. I mean, I think we could come up with somewhere
End of
for
line.
storage anyway. And we have a bunch of accessory buildings and things. Most of them are really, you know, we have like a trash building, we have a bike storage shed, you know, things like that. So we're not worried about the fire district. We know we can't go to the commissioners till it's worked out and we're started doing that. I don't know, is there anything else to mention there? Oh, you know, since it came up, the one other thing that Walt Tammy was presenting, I recognized was, there's a condition 16. I just want to call your attention to the fact that it may change before we go to the county commissioners too. This was these old commitments from the GMQS covenant from the 2002-3 approvals. Something about the child curve improvements and paving of part of Capitol Creek Road. Anthony from Roaring Fork Engineers and I are meeting with Andrew Knapp, the county engineer, out there next week to go over those. And so I suspect either the condition will stay the way it is and keep carrying forward, or it might get revised. Just a heads up. For now, it's fine. It's just carrying forward an old condition. But we think some of those requirements have already happened. One of them had to deal with the child curve, and none of us knew which one was the child curve until today. There's 3 curves out there.
Would entertain a motion.
So at this point, I'd like to make a motion. Anything from your consultants? They want to say anything before I make a motion?
Anybody else on the line?
Sorry, I know he's chair, but you guys all hung out for 2 hours, so.
I had a lot of head shaking.
At this point, I'd like to make a resolution of the Planning and Zoning Commission recommending approval to the Board of County Commissioners of Licking County, Colorado for the 143 Darling Farm LLC subdivision exemption for a lot line adjustment rezoning with plan unit development PUD, overlay PUD review, activity envelope site plan review, special review for a CDU, and a major amendment to a development permit with the following friendly modifications that would include number 12 we updated. As per the water attorney, which is on page 32 or page 7 of the resolution, page 32 of the pack. And we would also recommend exploring additional on-site RO rented units to the Board of County Commissioners, echoing the Snowmass Capitol Creek Board in their recommendations that would obviously reduce vehicle miles traveled and further support ranching operations locally.
Second.
Jeffrey's made a motion. A second by Jasmine. Guess we'll call this to a vote.
Let's have a discussion.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to add something that basically says that they're not gonna, you know, come back and ask for more square footage. Who knows what'll happen in 20 years, changes hands, somebody else comes in. I'd like to see that cap. I don't see a need to cap. I think it's just really on the free market. And not on the rental housing.
I think that's a friendly amendment.
Yeah, I'd certainly support that too, 'cause it's so cumbersome, you can't unravel it.
Not opposed to it. If we wanted to, reserve future, we wouldn't forfeit the 11,500 square feet. But we're forfeiting all of it. So I can't see why that would run counter to what we proposed.
I think part of it is we've seen a number of change in hands. over
Oh,
the-
sure.
in the
I
past
know how
5
these
years.
things happen.
In the past 5 years.
That's what
Yeah.
These are my,
And Jasmine, is that a friendly amendment to your second?
Okay. Any other
Do we
discussion?
want to craft that language?
Yeah, what's that
Or are we gonna do that?
forfeiture language look like?
I think we just add language to that condition number 5, basically. I don't know, I could beat it up to just say, you can't come back to compete. Growth management or to utilize TDRs to exceed these amounts or something along those.
I think that'd work.
lines. Nothing too complicated, but I think that's where it would live.
Okay,
yeah, that way if we do any affordable housing additional, it'll have to be considered exempt. Or, which is what the ranch manager unit already is, the one that we have.
Okay, so we have a motion by Jeffrey and a second by Jasmine with 3 amendments. The water attorney amendment, additional RO consideration, and the language that Joe recommends for the forfeiture of the 11,500 square feet in that.
so no future GMQS applications or use of TDRs.
And the Roaring Fork Rural is just self-evident. We don't need an addition to the reso that they still need approval from.
I think it's in
Oh,
there.
I think it's in there.
It's in there that they need to get approval from.
Yeah, it's in here
There's no
somewhere.
additional conditions needed.
And I think maybe your language about the supporting the caucus and the RO unit is probably lives in the findings. Yeah, just, thinking that's probably the best place to capture that.
I'm just trying to say consistent with the master plan and
Yep.
certainly with the board.
Yeah, no, I think.
And I think it's nice to see the caucus language carried through.
Yeah.
To the resolution.
Let's see, I think we add that as planning.
Okay, so there's a motion made by Jeffrey, seconded by Jasmine with the 3 additional amendments that we discussed. So now I will call this to a vote with the additional amendments and the language we talked about. Chelsea,
In favor, yes.
in favor. Joe,
Yes, in favor.
I'm in favor. Jasmine,
Yes,
Jeffrey,
Absolutely.
okay, passes.
And nice job, staff, and seriously, what a nice team. It's a really nice presentation and work and. great
Thank you, I
job.
appreciate it. So, you can,
That's a beautiful. part of
often
the
you feel like you can only do as good as your clients will let you, and, these clients are,
Not a lot of brevity, but
there's a lot to cover.
Okay.
Mitch is not known for his breath.
No, I don't wanna leave people guessing, I figured put it all in there.
Make it easier just to say what provisions of the code don't apply.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second, done. Thank you very much.
Albany is with next, the
Thank
council.
you all, yes, really
Thanks.
appreciate it, thank you.
Is it Albany?
Thanks, everybody.
Chelsea, thanks, Jasmine. Thanks, everyone else on the phone.
Jen?
Just didn't put them on.
Yeah.